Back in 2014, one of Liferay's employees, that was me, blogged about some security aspects of Liferay. Now, this is by far not complete, and it was 2014, so it's no longer really current and 100% relevant. But overall, there are still some gems in there that you might want to pay attention to, and I'll point you to the blogs in a bit. Now, if we want to secure Liferay, we have several levels. And again, reminder, we're not talking about each of these levels in detail, but just so much that so much as they touch Liferay and they can be touched by you and to your advantage in Liferay. So yes, we'll cover load balancers, web servers, Java EE servers, in our case Tomcat largely, document repositories, search servers, databases, just whatever is appropriate here. Connection encryption, I've mentioned it, I think a couple of times. We are not covering connection encryption in this course, other than letting you know, please do it. Wherever appropriate, if you trust the traffic in your network, in your own data center, that's fine, but nothing outside shall be trusted. Now, I forgot looking up the year of release for Firesheep, this infamous Firefox plugin that basically forced Facebook to go HTTPS and then all the world to go HTTPS. But that's a while ago, and I would say in 2018 and later, there is no excuse not to use HTTPS only. This time, I do not even want to talk about HTTPS mixed mode, but I only want to talk about purely encrypted everything. If you have a login to your system, then you want HTTPS, period. I don't accept any other answer to that. Not even an it depends. Because you're running Liferay, you have a sign-in, you gotta have encryption. Now, there are a few things that you can offload to your application server. We spoke about that. We can go with a password for your database in your properties file, which is a bad place and against several policies that I am aware of. So you must not have clear text passwords in any human readable files. And you can easily do so by, for example, we spoke about that, configuring a JNDI name for your database connection. Now, this effectively offloads the requirement to have the clear text password readily available to your application server. And Tomcat, for example, stores it in clear text on the drive. Now, is that what you want or not? Well, that's what you get, because, well, Tomcat has to get to it anyways, unless you want to enter a password every time Tomcat boots. This is what you get. There's a FAQ for Tomcat on that. For other application servers than Tomcat, I don't really know what they do, but unless they ask you for a password to decrypt your database passwords, for example, they will definitely only obscure it when written to disk anywhere, if not store it in clear text anyways. But it's no longer Liferay's side, it's now the application server side. We spoke about anybody being able to create accounts. And we also have a security manager embedded in Liferay, where you can determine what other and what third-party applications can do with your Liferay installation. So this can be configured, and you should look into it. As this is a portal property, you can easily look up the definition yourself. Default admin, password, test, name, email address, and so on. We've covered that. We've covered the servlet filters already, which are the single sign-on servlet filters, the ones that embed, the ones that enable CAS, NTLM, OpenSSO, and so on, and so on, and so on. You probably want just one of them at max. Remember, the first S in SSO stands for single. On LDAP, you probably want to go all the way to your LDAP server. At least that's what I typically see. So I don't want to tell you it depends, even though it depends, but 95% of the policies that I see are just on the side. If there is an LDAP, then the control of the LDAP server is not on Liferay's side, it's somewhere else. Somebody else has that control, and I'm happy to oblige. I'm not arguing with that. This is just what I see. And if you are one of the few people that allow write access to LDAP or that allow extended access, then, well, that's okay, but we're now in hardening, so I'm now making those 95% the 100%. Token-based single sign-on, we have this. Well, actually, any single sign-on system that you activate will transmit the identity to Liferay in one way or the other, and the installation requirements, installation instructions for the single sign-on system will tell you how exactly to configure that system. Now, when you connect to some of the services that Liferay offers, Liferay has a full API, and the API is available through remote access as well as through local access. The remote access is fully permission controlled, and not only that, it's also controlled through the IP permission layer, which means we gotta configure who has access to which API or to the API. This is specifically true, and we've seen that in the staging exercise where we need to enable the tunnel servlet, which is a specific API here, and we need to tell Liferay which system is allowed to publish, so which systems can connect. You can't just connect from any server. On top of that, we have the authentication verification layer, and we have the permission layer, which is just the regular permission just in Liferay. So for these remote services, we have a few more permissions here. And then also we have the service access profile layer, which will, well, basically whitelist some functionality for specific applications. And we will see an example of that for example, our application sync, where this is in effect. And with these, with all of these 4 layers, you have what you need in order to succeed placing a remote API call to Liferay. How do you configure them? Well, on the IP side, you can basically list all of the sites or all of the IP ranges or server names that can access the main servlet, as it says here. Basically everything Axis or JSON web services. So whoever is allowed to access them will have this access on top of the regular permission checks. And I've seen that mainly used with things like import routines. If you're importing content from a legacy system into Liferay, then all of that works quite well through the API. And if you just generate a SOAP client, or if you just use a JSON client, then you can just use Liferay's API and bulk create code, bulk create content in Liferay, reading from a legacy system and importing it. That's, I would say, one of the prime use cases that I've seen just this being used for. On the authentication side, we have a bunch of options, but doing so, like really making them available, is kind of dependent on the system that you're actually using. What are you using? Are you using Ruby, Rust, Go, anything in order to access the API? One of the systems that I've seen is just Perl. Perl and SOAP work well with each other. And that was because a customer had a Perl team that didn't have too much to do and a Liferay team that had too much to do. So they made the Perl team import all of the legacy content through Liferay's API, and that worked quite well. Now, which of these you want, if you want to go as far back as HTTP basic auth, or if you want to be rather sending explicit credentials or use Java sessions, up to you. I would say coordinate that with the people that write your routines, your import routines that need this API access, whatever works best for them. And then I want to remind you of security with staging. We have already covered quite a bit of staging. Well, we have created a remote staging connection. And with that connection, we have configured a bit. That is the remote network access, the shared secret between both machines. We have made the one machine being able to connect to the other, even though it was only the local Docker network, but that was still fine. There's not a lot to secure when you use local live staging. There is something to secure when you use remote live staging, which is the tunnel servlet encryption algorithm, or let's say the tunnel, the shared secret. There's not a lot you can secure with local live staging in the securing Liferay chapter, but there's a lot that you can secure in the remote live situation. You have set up a local remote staging server in one of the early chapters, and you will remember that you've configured a shared secret. You'll remember that you have opened access to certain IP ranges, and then you have used it. Now, if you want to configure something more than just the shared secret, by default, Liferay uses a tunneling servlet encryption algorithm that I needed to look up first in order to know what it does, but I did. So I found it here. Let me remove the coloring. I found it here. The default algorithm is AES, which gives me the hint AES requires a key. And this is a shared key. This is a symmetric encryption. And guess what? We're using the shared secret to build the key for this AES connection, which means we will know, we will have this traffic encrypted over the line if we start the remote staging operation. I told you we're not covering HTTPS here, which is still true because this is just the tunneling servlet that speaks an encrypted channel. This is not signing, this is just encrypting. So no HTTPS, but pure AES symmetric encryption. And as you see down here, this is the excerpt from Portal Properties. We could also use any of these encryption algorithms, but with AES available, who wants to? Network communication can be limited through something. In this case, we have the router firewalls in here. Each layer should be able to send packets to just directly connected layers. A wording that I didn't use before, but that might be worth pointing out. So if your Liferay is able to talk to your database, that doesn't mean that your firewall is able to talk to your database. Then remote access to services is passed through multiple layers: IP permission, authentication verification, permission layer, and security access profile layer. The authentication verification or auth verifier pipeline allows Liferay to verify a user's identity prior to invoking a service. Service access policies contain a wide list of service names and methods. So there we are. This is as far as we can go in the securing chapter in what is prepared. Even though it's from 2014, you might want to look up the Securing Liferay blog series that I did in 5 chapters, the last one dating from 2016. It doesn't give you a lot of new issues, but it might repeat a few of these aspects before. Let me go in here. Among others, it has portal properties in there. Not only the recommendation to read portal properties, but it will also contain a list of search terms. Let me enlarge that a little bit. Now, when you open portal properties, here's a list of things that you can search for as a starting point. This is not everything you ever need. This is a good starting point if you look for password, encrypt, hash, restrict, security, securing, auth, timeout, servlet filter, deploy, register, and HTTPS. Those are good search terms to just get to the basic security aspects that are configured in portal properties. But as I said, they're not all. If you find more, comment on this blog post. It'll be there for eternity. Let's see what else we have here. Another one on port issues, which is HTTP and HTTPS. I can now bring this back to the original size. Then there is some file access that I have in chapter 4 and another HTTPS caveat where I like to say when I have a Tomcat and when I have a web server or remote proxy, reverse proxy, in front, then I want the SSL termination. Well, I actually want the SSL termination to be done by the reverse proxy. It needs to be done by it, but that's another reason why I want a reverse proxy, because that can actually properly do HTTPS. And I don't want Tomcat to handle all of the end user encryption. That's coming from my history of being with Tomcat for a long time when you basically didn't do Java encryption. Right now, Tomcat is fully capable of just doing the proper encryption anyways. But I rather like my reverse proxy doing it because Tomcat runs so much under the user that it runs on, and having access to the encryption keys, to the private keys for the same process, for the same user, to me doesn't really make any sense. And I think Apache and HA proxy and others handle that way better. It's just one of the aspects that I'm outlining in chapter 5 of this series.